Hello everyone, welcome back to the last part of the neutral card review for the upcoming Perils and Paradise Hearthstone expansion. I'm really looking forward to getting to the class cards, but now we're going to get the end of the neutral cards. They set the foundation for what the class cards can do, what synergies we have to expect, and maybe some like really cool uses that we maybe have not thought about before. And yeah, let's jump right into it. Last time we had a little bit of a look at Grifta. Grifta is an absolutely amazing legendary. I think it'll be played in many decks. I think it's a really decent tempo play. Allows you to have a lot of like combinations as well in the late game that are very, very useful. And it reduces your opponent's hand space effectively in quite a lot of situations. So, and then next up we have the Siege Side Giant, which is a 10 mana, 8/8 epic card. It's, like I said, all the cards that are going to be coming now as neutral, so they can be played in all classes. And this one costs 2 less for each time you've used a location in this game. So we need to use locations 5 times to make this card 0, which is of course where we want to be. What I think about this card is, like, in general, I think it'd be way too slow in this meta. I don't see a way that this would work, but maybe there's a deck that uses quite a lot of locations and really wants to synergize with them, and they just play the Giants because they're good threats. The same way that like Druid played Naga Giants for a while, not only to heal, but just because 0 mana 8/8s are really great when you have like a lot of tempo going and you want to just overwhelm your opponent with multiple boards. So I could see this card being played, especially with the new locations that open up after you've used something. If they're like really easily activatable, then this could really be played. And spoiler alert, we'll get back to this when we get to Mage, because Mage has like a location that synergizes really well with this. But for now, let's keep this card in mind. 10 mana, 8/8, Sea Giant, and costs 2 less for every time you use a location. We have 2 mana, 2/3 Mech, the Housekeeper. It's after you use a location, gain 3 armor. I think this card is trash, and I will just move on for the sake of time. Again, it was a 2 mana, 2/3 mech that gains you 3 armor every time you use a location. Though with locations this can be used multiple times in the same turn, maybe you could gain quite a lot of armor. Maybe in Mage this could be fine, but probably not that great. 5 mana, 5/5 bad card, summon a copy of a friendly location. Unless there are any locations that are completely busted, I think I'd rather play the location than have this. Don't think this is a super great card. 5 mana, 4/7 Murloc, Bayfin, Bodyfin. After a minion is summoned for your opponent during your turn, silence and destroy it. This works pretty nicely against Unkilliacs, right? Because Reborn minions, basically, as soon as a minion with Reborn dies, it dies for good, because again, it becomes silenced and destroyed. Also, if you proc any death rattles, they immediately die. But this seems like a really steep cost to invest to make sure that like your board clear really board clears. And then has to also be like a one-sided board clear. For example, you can't play this in Brawl and full board clear. It doesn't work, because if this doesn't survive, then the Brawl doesn't do its effect. So this also has to like survive the effect. Yeah, I don't think this is like what I want to be doing for 5 mana. I don't think this is a good card. I don't think it will see play. Again, it's a 5 mana, 4/7 Murloc that summons whenever a minion is summoned on your opponent's side of the board during your turn. Yeah, so they use silence and destroy it. It still doesn't, obviously it doesn't get silenced and destroyed on their turn, because otherwise I couldn't play any minions. Then we have a 2 mana 4/1 Battlecry, discover a pirate. Bloodsail Recruiter. Unless there's some super specific pirates you want to discover, this really isn't that great. I mean, what comes to mind is Pirate Rogue, because you have the synergy. This is a really good card with the 5 mana 5/5 that summons a copy of a pirate whenever you play it, and then it attacks a random target and then dies. This is a lot of damage. It's kind of like Eviscerate. But then again, we've seen this archetype, like, it doesn't work because you don't have enough mana cheat. You need to cheat way more mana than this to make this archetype work, because you're not even getting close to winning any games. So I think this card's probably trash. We have 3 mana 3/4 pirate. Your cards from another class cost 1 less. Somewhat interesting, of course, for Rogue, because you can play like a bunch of really sick cards from another class that you have previously discovered. And then this card might be like a 0 mana 3/4, but you want to play 0 mana 3/4s early in the game and not like later in the game. So I don't think this is really a card that you want to play, because I think you have to play too many cards. You have to be too dependent on already having a good hand, because what you want to do is you want to play your Scorpion, you want to play your 1 mana spells immediately to gain back tempo from the excavating which you've done. Excavating is inherently slow. So I think the Concierge, the 3 mana 3/4 pirate that makes your cards from another class cost 1 less, is also unplayable. Then you have 6 mana 6/6 Dread Deserter. Has charge if this didn't start in your deck. Alright, so you can put it in the ETC, for example, I would guess. But even then I wouldn't do it. I mean, it's a 6 mana 6/6 charge. If I put it in ETC, it costs me like 10 mana to summon a 6/6 with charge. Unless I have some crazy ways of making this minion a lot bigger. Why don't I just play Leroy? Like, you know, Leroy costs a mana less, and minions die the next turn anyway, so why do I need this 2-piece? Like, what is the upside of the health? Sure, it's a pirate, sure I can discover it, but don't see this card ever seeing any play. 3 mana 3/3 Overplanner. Battlecry, discover 3 cards in your deck to put on top in that order. And the way that this card works, again, 3 mana 3/3. Battlecry, discover 3 cards in your deck to put on top in that order. So what happens is, you play this card, you get 3 cards to choose from. So a discover option, you pick one, that goes on top of the deck. You pick another, that goes second top of the deck, and another and the third top of the deck. And it just takes 3 cards. They can be the same, they don't have to be the same. But they will just like, the first card is removed from the options because it goes on top. But other than the one card that is on top, you can see every other card to be the, like, that is in your deck to be the second choice. You can have something in your first, like, 3, you pick one, and this card can show up in the second round of picks again. So you don't have to, like, you don't have to compromise. Then, on the other hand, is spending 3 mana on planning out your next 3 turns with a 3/3 body worth it? If you need top deck, I guess this is something that I could see being played in a Reno deck, but Reno has gotten nerfed one more time recently, and I think it's now really expensive. Reno decks have taken a pretty big hit. But yeah, for example, in Brand Warrior, you're going to probably play this. Just 3 shots to be able to get your Bran. Like, a lot of decks have this one card that is broken, so you want that one card that is broken. I wouldn't be surprised if this card's also in play. Just because you have 3 shots at getting the one important card, and especially if you have, like, a deck where you have, like, effects shuffled into the deck that are cast when drawn. For example, the new patches, like pirates that have charge, or other cards that are cast when drawn that you would like to get on top, so they just get played immediately and you get the upside of it immediately. This card could see some play. I don't think it's like super absurd that this card will see play. It's probably on the lower spectrum. Again, 3 mana 3/3. Battlecry, discover basically the next 3 cards of your deck. It's probably like a 2-star card, which means fringe playable, and I don't think much will change this. Then we have 3 mana 3/2 elemental called Lamplighter. Battlecry, deal 1 damage, improved by each turn in a row you've played an elemental. So if you played an elemental this turn or last turn, it deals 2 and 3 and so on. Card's obviously trash. 3 mana 2/4, give a friendly pirate Wind Fury. And it's also a pirate, so 3 mana 2/4 pirate. This of course works with the charge minion that we just saw, where you can, like, you could have, but the problem with the charge minion is it only has charge if it didn't start in your deck. So ideally you would have wanted to play this in something like Hand Buff Paladin, but if you want to buff off the charger, it must have like not started in your deck. And I don't see you playing too many pirates in these kind of decks. Wind Fury is a really crazy effect, and usually you're not supposed to underestimate it. There's a lot of times you see Wind Fury on the card and you're like, yeah, I don't know. And then more often than enough, it turns out to be like quite a decent idea. I don't see this landing on a pirate on curve often enough that you just get the immediate value. Like if we, for example, had like a Flamin' Pirate, like a 1 mana 3/2 pirate, where you could just curve this and play like an aggressive deck, I could kind of see this card happening. But with the pirates that we currently have in the game, I don't think the Sailboat Captain is any good. Then we have 7 mana 5/8 Battlecry, summon an 8/8 beast for your opponent. It attacks all of their minions. This is a really difficult to evaluate card, I think. Because the problem is if you just play this and they don't have 8 attack on their board, this 8 attack will hit you in the face next turn. And if they have more than 8 attack on board, but they also have more than 8 health on board, or they have at least 1 poisonous minion, this board clear can go pretty badly. And if I compare this to like Unkilliax and how good that is at board clearing, I mean, sure, this costs 2 mana less, but it's so situational. I kind of like to compare it a little bit to the 8 mana Deathwing that Warrior used to play, but the 8 mana Deathwing was good when your opponent didn't have anything, when you just got a big minion on board. This only works in really specific scenarios, so I think this card will not see any play. Like 7 mana 5/8, you summon an 8/8 for them, and if it doesn't die, you get so much damage. So they need to have a lot of power on board, and if they have a lot of power on board, they might have more than 8 health, and then the beast might not kill everything. So I think this is just too situational for it to be like a great card. Then we have 1 mana 2/1 Naga Battlecry. If you cast 3 spells while holding this, discover one of them. In the wise words of Reynard, a cheap 1 mana card doesn't need to have that much of a big upside to be considered good. I mean, that advice is from 4 years ago, but I still think it holds true to some extent. Just being able to rediscover a card. If you cast 3 spells, that's quite a lot though. You know, casting 3 spells while you're holding this, you discover one of them. This is technically, of course, something that would go kind of well in a Naga Demon Hunter. Though Naga Demon Hunter right now would like to... They play more for tempo. They play like their 1/3 Nagas, and then they hit you in the face, and then they deal the remaining damage with the combo. They don't actually go all in on the combo. I'm skeptical about this card. Because... yeah, I don't know if there's too many decks where you don't want to play your 1-drops on 1. Like, playing 1-drops on 1 is the nice part. Playing 1-drops later is not that great. Unless they cheat mana. And even then, they're often not that great. So I don't think this card is super playable just because it's like a 1 mana... It's a 1 mana card that you don't want to play on 1. You don't want to keep in your... You want to keep in your mulligan, but you don't want to play it. It's a really weird space where you often just don't get a value. So I don't think this card will see play. Again, a 1 mana 2/1 9. But you have to cast 3 spells while holding this to discover one of them. So I don't think it will see play. Alright, then we have King Tide, but that's a mage card, so I'll cover it in the next mage video. I got released a little bit earlier, but this is really insane. Can't wait to cover it in the next video, but we'll get through the rest of the comments quickly, because they're important to lay the groundwork. 2 mana 1/4 Pirate. After an adjacent minion attacks, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Again, it's the Coconut Cannoneer. 2 mana 1/4 Pirate. After an adjacent minion attacks, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. It's not a good effect. The card's unplayable. 3 mana 2/4 Pirate. Hosen Roughhouser. Whenever another friendly pirate attacks, give it +1/+1. I think the card's too expensive for the effect. 7 mana 4/20. Haha! Beached Whale. Taunt. Battlecry, deal 10 damage to this minion. So it's a 7 mana 4/10 Taunt. Or unless you can cheat it out, for example, as Hunter with Dreams, you can... yeah, you can make a big Taunt wall. But there's a lot of decks that have some sort of removal. Or just don't care about this. I think pretty much every single deck in the game has a good and effective removal for this card specifically. So I think there's no way this sees any play. 3 mana 3/3 Cryopractor. Okay, this is a word joke, of course. Cryopractor, because it freezes. Yeah, it's a 3 mana 3/3 Battlecry, give a minion +3/+3 and freeze it. That's quite a lot of buff. It's like kind of a 6/6, but you have to wait a turn. I don't... I'm thinking a little bit about this. But like skipping the attack when you're in an aggressive deck, and there's enough like things where you get 2/3/3s for 3 mana, where this probably ends up worse. I don't think this card will see play. And then we have 4 mana, 3/5 Pirate. Battlecry, discover a card from the newest expansion, which of course will change over time. The Resort Valet. Also don't think it's not playable. The card's too expensive. 3 mana, 2/1 Undead Terrible Chef. Battlecry, summon a 0/2 Nerubian Egg. Death Rattle, destroy it. I don't think this is what you want to do with your Hearthstone turns. 4 mana, 4/5 Battlecry. 4 mana, 4/5 Elemental. Alright, so Yeti stats. Battlecry, give all other minions -1/-1. Death Rattle, give all other minions +1/+1. So, of course, this is like kind of nice when your opponent has 1 HP minions. You can kill a bunch of them with it. But since your minions usually die on your opponent's turn when they can decide where the buffs go, I think this Death Rattle is usually quite a big negative effect. I do really like the Battlecry effect. It's pretty cool because it just kind of acts as a clear. But generally, yeah, just like a Yeti with a really strange upside, it's not a card that I see being played in Hearthstone these times. Then we have 4 mana, 3/5 Sleepy Resident, a Residence Sleeper. They're going all in on the memes. First we had the Beached Whale with a 420 stat line, and now we have the Tazdingo with the Resident Sleeper Taunt tag. So this is basically, this is Tazdingo, but additionally it says Tazdingo is Ascension Shieldmaster, of course. Death Rattle, all other minions fall asleep. Alright, 4 mana, 3/5 Taunt. I can actually see this card being played. Because it's like, it can really stall against more aggressive decks. And even later in the game, I think this can be quite annoying to deal with for your opponents. It won't disrupt combos, because falling asleep just makes them not able to attack. But, yeah, it just blocks your opponent from being able to like overrun you. Just put the board and then they kill it, for example, with a spell, and the minions still don't get to do face damage. So I think this card actually has the potential to be playable, and people will spam Resident Sleeper when this hits the board, and it will make games more Resident Sleeper because it will put a wrench into whatever the aggro deck is trying to do and stall out for like more controlish kind of decks. Really interesting card. Quite like it. And then we have 1 mana, 1/2, all types. So it's an Amalgam, which has all minion types. This has all minion types. Death Rattle, shuffle this into your deck. It keeps any enchantments. And like, it's nice when you get to buff this, of course. Then you get to summon a buffed minion. But we've had some really crazy minions that get buffed over time and shuffled and buffed, and none of them ever saw play because they were just too bad. Because later in the game, you never want to draw. Like, even if you have like overstated minions, it's nothing you really ever wanted to draw. I can see this card being discovered by some random options in like a value mirror, where you like, you just try to discover a demon, and this is another demon in the pool, and you put this in your deck, and the game goes on quite long. If you're a rogue and you discover, it'll probably make for some crazy plays, but I don't think anybody wants to really put this in their deck. Like, even if you play, let's say hand buff Paladin, and you would shuffle this like buffed minion back into your deck, I think by the time you draw this and replay this, you won't be able to do that much with it. Unless you can somehow give this like charge, Wind Fury, stealth, some super crazy effects that make this like a kill combination over multiple turns. I really don't see this being played, but I think it's pretty cool. Like, I'm a great fan of Amalgams. They make some cool cards. And then we have Insidious. Insidious is a legendary card, so you can only put one of them in your deck, and it's a 6 mana, 2/10 elemental. At the end of your turn, upgrade your eruptions. And then, what are eruptions? Eruptions are cards that get shuffled into your deck by the battle cry of Insidious. Shuffle 5 eruptions into your deck is the battle cry, and the card itself is cast when drawn. Deal 1 damage to all enemies. Okay, so you play this, and then if it survives until the end of your turn, it will deal 2 damage. And then if it will survive again, it will deal 3 damage. So you have quite a lot of damage to your opponent. If all your eruptions are drawn, that's already 10 damage to all the minions and the enemy hero, which is pretty interesting. Especially if you have some end of draw effects or other ways to get through your deck. Or you can play multiple Insidious and get like multiple of those in your deck. Maybe a rogue can sometimes discover this from like the Excavate Treasure. And then just play multiple of those. That could be pretty interesting. And I'm wondering if this card will actually see play in some decks. Like if you put this in your deck. Because the effect overall is quite powerful. But as a 6 mana 2/10... it's hard to kill. The attack is easy to ignore, but since it has an end of your turn effect, your opponent still wants to kill it. Because getting hit for 2 AoE is annoying. Getting hit for 5 AoE is game losing. So this is quite an interesting card. Just really wondering if for 6 mana any deck is really willing to kind of invest this much in a card, because if you don't draw any of the eruptions immediately, this card is very low impact. Because you probably have to shuffle the eruptions and then draw them sometime soon. I'm currently trying to think about which deck would like to play them. And I can't really come up with one. Of course, Elemental Synergy deck would really like to make use of this card, especially if you could, like if you can discover more of them, if you can play multiple of those, even those are legendary. That would be quite cool, and you could do some like heavy damage with this card. And with Bran, of course, you could do like a lot of board clears, but I think Boom Boss is still like the safer combination. But if you manage to have a deck that's like slow enough that this actually slows down your opponent, you don't immediately die. You think of some control priest or some control warrior. I feel like this card could actually see play, but it would have to be like a very heavy control deck that by itself doesn't really mind that much, like having a slow turn on like turn 6. Another problem that I see with this card is a lot of slow decks want to play more value, and in order to play more value in Hearthstone right now, what you do is you play Marin, because Marin gives you the wand, Marin gives you the cobalt, the goblet, it gives you the crown, it gives you a lot of like really sick resources. And then you want to pick the wand always, draw 3 cards, and like potentially get something game winning. Some super cheap card that's like amazing to get for 0 mana. And to get a cast when drawn eruption from the wand is really bad. And I think this will be one of the main reasons why this card will most likely not find a lot of inclusions in any decks. But yeah, just to quickly summarize, because we looked through a lot of common cards right now. What I think are the common cards that you have to remember for the upcoming class reveals is going to be the 10 mana 8/8 Sea Giant that costs 2 less for every location you've used. Maybe the 2 mana 2/3 mech that after you use a location gains 3 armor. That is tentative. Could be used. And then the 3 mana 3/3 Overplanner that just puts like lets you choose 3 times from 3 cards to put 3 on top of your deck. I think all the other cards sadly do not make the cut. But with that, and we have Resident Sleeper, the 4 mana 3/5 Taunt that as soon as it dies puts all minions to sleep and makes your opponent not able to attack for the rest of the turn. So really looking forward to jumping in the class cards next. Thank you for sticking through this really long video with me. Always remember that you're valuable and you matter. And let's dive into the class cards.